cepat sikit. Okay. Okay, so let's just recap from what we did in the last class. Okay, sekejap eh. Okay, all right. So if you can recap from the last class, what we did was basically earned value analysis. We have gone through that. Okay, what is earned value analysis in general? Let's just make a theoretical recap before we go into the exercise that we are supposed to discuss. What can you understand by earned value analysis? No one could provide the answer ke? I'll just randomly call a name. Okay, Abdul Qayyum. What can you understand by... Yes, what can you understand by earned value analysis?
Value ni, kalau method ni kita perlukan plan value.
Okay.
Value dengan actual cost untuk kita tentukan kita punya projek ni over budget ke, dalam masih ikut jadual ke.
Okay.
Nak tentukan.
What do we want to find? Apa yang kita nak cari? From there, what do we get?
Maksudnya?
What do we get after we find over budget, under budget tu apa tu? What is that? What is the word for it? Term untuk benda tu. Performance kan?
Performance, yes.
Performance kan? Okay, so earn value, correct. Basically, from this method, you can find the planned value. Okay, so the value that you have planned for, budget, and then your earned value. Earned value, basically the work that you have performed. Okay, so the budgeted cost from the work that you perform, it shows that how much work that you have performed. And also actual cost, how much cost that you have spent for the work that you have performed. So from that is where you can find all these shadow variance, overrun of time and so on, cost variance for us to find or for us to mention or to highlight the performance of the project. Okay, so the main thing is it is to highlight the performance through monitoring. Okay, so you will monitor lah. This is where you monitor. So you collect the data from the site. For cost, you may collect it from the accounts. Okay, so how much cost has been spent for human resource, how much cost has been spent for material, equipment rental, and what's not. So that is where you actually identify how much you have actually keluarkan. Okay, so actually spend for the progress at that point of time. And your time is basically or your earned value is basically how much work that you have performed. So that one will be through observation. Okay, so you need to see physically how much you have completed. So sometimes it could be quite difficult or it will be quite subjective for you to actually identify berapa kerja dah siap. So because especially if you are talking about a project where you have so many activities, okay, a simple housing project. Okay, so you might have this area, you have only completed bricklaying. On this area, you might start, you have completed painting, and then other yang you just started on the structural work, ground beam, column. So let's say you have different phases of a project and you have different progress at each of the phases. How do you want to say in 1% how much have you completed? So sometimes that will be a little bit subjective lah. Okay, so from the contractor perspective, you will give a bigger number. You have completed more, so that you highlight that your progress is actually well. On the other side, okay, so that is what you claim for every month. But on the other hand, how would the client pay you? Will they put 100% trust on what you have actually claimed for? Or would they have another party actually coming in to judge? So usually they will have the QS to verify the work on your side. But it's subjective lah, you see. So unless you are calculating berapa height of the brick that you have actually completed, so how many houses that actually painted and how many layers that have been painted. So rarely that people go into that depth of measuring how much have been completed, lebih kurang. So it will be quite subjective in nature unless you have some project which are very how to say, easy to actually measure. For example, for example, if you're talking about excavation, so maybe you are calculating based on meter cube. Okay, so how many trucks tippers could equal how many meter cubes? So maybe 7 meter cube trucks. So you can actually identify based on the quantity, but rarely also that people go into that depth lah, okay, to calculate the how much have been done. So practically it will be quite subjective in nature, but it wouldn't fall too far from what the judgment between the contractor and the client lah. All right. Okay. So basically, earn value is where you can identify your schedule progress and also cost progress. This is where you monitor. Okay, so you observe, you get all the data, your cost data, your physical completion data, and you actually represent it in report form. So this is where you can actually highlight in a progress report or whatsoever. Okay. All right, so that is basically what earn value is about. And to conduct that, you need to have 3 values that you need to know. Okay, so plan, like what Qayyum has mentioned, plan, earn, actual. All right, so we have done a couple of exercises. I presume you have completed the entire analysis. Okay, so I did mention, very important, you need to get these 3 values correct. Once you get these 3 values correct, the shadow variance, cost variance, index, shadow index, it is easy. But just don't mistakenly minus the different variable. Plan value minus earn value ke salah lah. Okay, so if you're talking about shadow, earn value minus plan value. If you're talking about cost, earn value minus actual cost. So you need to make sure that thing is correct. It is very simple. Okay, so the main thing is to identify this one. All right. Okay, so let's go on to this. What is the value that you get for plan value? Anyone?
4,000.
4,000. Anyone getting other answer than this besides 4,000? Ada nilai lain?
No.
No eh? Sama. Okay, earn value?
3,200.
3,200. Okay, any other value than this? Tak ada.
4,200.
4,200. Okay. Any other value than this? Okay, tak ada. What is the actual cost?
4,200.
4,200. Any other value than this for actual cost?
I found a few locations for 1,200.
Sama.
Sama eh? Alright. So let's see. Okay. Kejap. Okay, so let's go through this together. A house owner hires a contractor to provide labor, okay, to tile 5 rooms in his home. Okay, so 5 rooms. The contractor estimates that he can complete each room in 2 days. So initially 5 rooms. Okay, and one room would require 2 days. Okay, and 8 hours per day. Alright, so his charges are 100 per hour and the same rate for overtime. Okay, based on his estimate, the project should be completed in 2 weeks, 5 working days per week. Okay, so meaning to say that 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so you will complete room 1 and then room 2. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here will be room 3, room 4, and room 5. Okay, so the project should be completed. So one room will take 2 days. So practically, if you work accordingly, you would be able to complete all rooms, 5 rooms in 2 weeks, 5 working days. So the first room was completed in 3 days, including 2 hours of overtime. Okay, so room 1 has been completed in 3 days plus 2 hours OT. Okay, the second room was completed in the next 2 days. Okay, so the contractor has not started work on the remaining rooms. So practically only room 1 and room 2 has been completed. So assess the performance of the project at the end of week 1. Okay, so here. With respect to the project priority using this. Okay, so my question is, so we will be accessing at week 1. So how do we calculate the plan value? Someone help me?
And 8 hours times 5 days times 100.
Okay, so your plan value here at week 1 is basically you have to complete 5 working days kat sini to complete 2.5 room. Okay, so either you can calculate based on room, 2.5 room, but still it comes to the value. Okay, so you can calculate based on room per day, whatever, but actually at the end of this, you should be able to get the value of working hours kat sini. So it will be 8 working hours, okay, times 100 times 5 days. Betul ke?
Betul.
Okay, so 8 hours per day. Okay, so 100 per hour. So 1 day would equal to 800 ringgit. And until this point, you are actually paying for 5 days, 5 working days. So by right, you should be able to get 4,000. Okay, all right. So basically, okay. So next thing is earn value. Okay, how much work you have completed at week 1. Okay, so where were we? So this is what you have performed. Okay, so the first room was completed in 3 days, including 2 hours of overtime. The second room was completed in the next 2 days. Okay, so only this has been completed and the contractor has not started working on the other rooms. So what would be the earned value? So how would you gather from here? So basically, you have only completed first room and also the second room. What will be the end value? End value is the budgeted cost for the work performed. Okay, so at this moment, you have only performed 2 rooms. You haven't started working on the other room. Jadi, how much is budgeted for the work that you have performed? You got the value, right? Please help me. How did you get the value?
2/5 times 8,000.
Again?
2/5 times 8,000.
205 times
8,000.
8,000.
Hmm.
Okay. Can be done as well as this. Okay, so did you get 3,200?
Yes.
Okay, so you can do as this. Okay, so you have completed 2 rooms out of the 5 rooms times 8,000. Pun boleh. Other than that, other method? You can
8
also look
hours.
into individual rooms. 8 hours times
Times 5 days.
100. 5 days. Okay, lepas tu?
Plus 2 hours overtime.
Tapi that one will be the actual cost kan? The overtime tu. Yeah, that one will be actual cost nanti rasanya. Earned value is basically the value of the work that you have performed. Okay, at this moment you have performed 2 ni je, 2 rooms. Okay, and the budgeted cost for these rooms are basically just the plan yang ni basically. Okay, so you can do it as I have only completed 2 rooms out of 5 rooms and times with the entire budget because you are actually comparing with the entire room. You boleh do in this form, or another way is basically you just calculate based on dia punya, sekejap eh. Okay, or else you can actually do it based on 2 rooms.
2 rooms times 2 days.
Yes, 8
Times
hours
hours,
times 100
ringgit.
times 4. Okay, so daily is 8 hours times 100 ringgit. So 1 day would equal 800 ringgit times with 4 days because 1 room will require 2 days. Okay, so 2 rooms will require 4 days. So 2 rooms. Okay, so days. So that will also equal to 3,200. So the main thing is it doesn't matter how you get the number, but you need to understand what is earned value, the value of the work that you have performed. Okay, so you have only completed 2 rooms and the value yang you have actually planned for the 2 rooms are only this. So you can easily see that in terms of schedule, you have planned to complete here 2.5 rooms. But at this level, you have only completed 2 rooms. Okay, and the 2 rooms, the planned budget for it is only 3,200. So easily in terms of schedule, you have actually ke belakang by half room lah kat sini. Okay, so once you calculate, you will see your schedule variance to be behind schedule. Okay, negative and also less than 1. Okay, so make sure you because the one mentioned just now, that will be actual cost sebenarnya. Okay, so that is earned value. So your actual cost is where you're going to see your overtime. You use overtime for the work that you have performed though. Okay, so for actual cost is where you're going to gather all that. Okay, so the first room completed in 3 days and 2 hours of overtime. So this is the budget that you use. This is the hours that you use to complete the first room. Okay, and the second room you completed just nice. Okay, so it is given 2 days and you have completed 2 days. So actually for the second room you completed just okay. So just on dot. Tapi the first room you would have overused the budget sebenarnya. Okay, so your actual cost will be the cost for the first room. Okay, so the cost for the first room you have used 3 days. So one day, okay, 108 8 hours times 100 times 3 days. Okay, and plus with 2 hours of extra overtime, so will be 200. Okay, so this will be room 1 plus with room 2 is as required, so 1600. So 8 hours times 100 times 2 days. So this will be room 2. Okay, is it correct? Betul ke tu room 1?
Yes.
Okay, so what's the value for room 1? What's
It
the
would be
value?
2,600.
2600. Okay, plus room 2 1600. So does it equal to 4200?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so your actual cost will equal to 4200. Okay, so in terms of cost itself, you can see you are actually over budget. Okay, so your earned value, the work that you have performed, allocated cost is only 3200. But in reality, you have completed that 2 room dengan 4200. Jauh lah. Okay, so because your first room tu you have spent way too much. Okay, so 3 days. So it's quite a lot. So from here itself, you can actually see that you have been on over budget. Okay, and basically your whole performance of your project is not that well lah. Okay, so please conduct the following. I think you have done it. Okay, so please come analyze the schedule variance, the cost variance, schedule performance index, cost performance index, and then estimate to complete and estimate at completion. So you can get this will be very much higher than how much is the original value kat sini? 8,000 eh?
Yes, 8,000.
Okay, so you would be able to get way further than this lah. Okay, so please complete the whole thing. Okay, once you have completed it, okay, so you have assessed the performance at the end of week 1. Very important when you are monitoring ni, you need to know where are you monitoring. So in this situation, you are monitoring at week 1. So different question would require different time frame untuk monitor ni. So you have to be very careful when you're reading the question. Where are you monitoring? Are you monitoring at week 1? Are you monitoring at week 2? So you need to be careful on this. Okay, and with respect to that, look into this. Okay, so you have cost to be enhanced, which means if possible, you want it to reduce. Time is to be constrained. Okay, so it is what it is. And performance is to be accept. Okay, so you boleh, the client would accept that if the performance is to be reduced in order for you to ensure that your time frame is constrained. Now your time um, is overtime. Okay, so you have overshadowed, so which is not really good in this aspect. Okay, and your cost, if possible, to be reduced. So based on this situation, okay, so suggest three options that could be implemented to fulfill the requirement. When you are trying to fulfill the requirement, you are trying to get back your project into this status. Okay, so this is what being required by the client. Tapi now you have been ahead of time, you have been behind time kat sini. Cost pun you have been over budget. So you are actually having problem performance is bad basically because you're not adhering to what the client has requested. So what can we do to ensure that our project ni back to this and comply to this? So you might give three option kat sini. Apa option pertama?
Mengurangkan scope.
Udin?
Reduce the scope performance.
Okay, reduce the scope. How can we reduce the scope? So go back because it's a tiling project. So how can we reduce it? So how can we reduce the scope? So the project is tiling.
Use cheap tiles.
Reduce?
Guna cheap tiles. Cheap one. Tiles yang murah.
Cheaper tiles. Okay, lagi? Okay, what else? Think. So tiles tu, how can we reduce, we need to reduce the time sekarang ni, okay? And we need to potentially reduce the cost yang kita dah over budget ni by exploiting the performance or the scope ni. So what we can do? Ada idea ke? Class, if you give this in your exam, you would get 2 marks. What else?
Material,
Material. Okay, how?
pakai simen grade rendah. Mortar.
Cement grade rendah rather than tile Cement grade lower rather than tile. Okay, any other opinion from here? How about just tile ni? Fikir tentang tile. What can we do with the tiles? What can we manipulate from tiles ni to reduce the time and potentially also does not increase your cost, reduce the cost?
Can we use a bigger tile?
Yes, bigger tiles would do. Okay, so you might suggest bigger tiles. Okay, so it will reduce your time frame untuk masukkan yang tile yang kecil-kecil tu. Okay, so bigger tiles. And to check that the bigger tiles too, it is still within the budget or actually cheaper than the smaller tiles. Okay, so with cost control lah. Betul? Okay, so bigger tiles, you will reduce the time frame for workmanship. Okay. What else? Maybe the height of the tiles. Okay, so sometimes we require tiling too. Can be because it didn't state whether it's for the wall or for the floor or for a certain floor. So it can be reducing the extent of tiling. If it's tiling on the wall, for example, so it could reduce the height, or for the slab itself, it could reduce the extent of tiling too. Okay, so the extent rather than the full room. So potentially maybe certain percentage of the room. The extent of tiling to be reduced. Okay. Worst case scenario, maybe you do not tile the entire 5 rooms. So maybe it's only 4 rooms. So the other room you might use as suggested as this other method. So for example, as suggested here. Okay, cheaper tiles could reduce for cost ni. Okay, so cheaper tiles could help this, but I'm not sure if the cheaper tiles could actually reduce the time as well. Okay, so this one, unless there are justification where there are certain cheaper tiles that actually require reduced time with justification, then it will be accepted. Okay, so cheaper tiles in what sense? So it could reduce the cost definitely, but how does it reduce the time? So how can the cheaper tiles also reduce the time sekarang? We are constrained. Okay, so if there are proper justification and it makes sense, so you will get 2 marks from here. Okay, and cement grade ni, yes, you can highlight a different construction method rather than tiling. You use a cement, basically just paint the room rather than tiling. It might be faster. Okay, might be. So cuma with justification. So will be 2 marks here. Okay, bigger tile, yes. Okay, so it could reduce your time definitely, but you need to highlight also with cost control. So the cost potentially you want a bigger tile, tapi the cost is still within the frame that we actually provide. So 2 marks. Okay, and you can actually look into the reducing, not D, T. Reducing the extent of tiling to be done. Okay, so rather than maybe the full room of tiling, so maybe half of the room ke, if it's a slab, if it's on the floor, basically in terms of what is the extent, so probably basically towards the end of the room ke, others basically to be carpeted and so on. So those are basically any suggestion that you can give, so long you do not increase the cost here. So if you look, most of the time we get response such as, okay, increase workers. Okay, so increase workers, boleh you would reduce the time. Okay, so you might get back your time within the frame that you are required, tapi you will increase the cost. Okay, so you have to be careful. If you increase workers, increase material, increase equipment, whatsoever, okay, so if that increases the cost, then you tak fulfill benda ni. So it's already over budget. Adding that would actually add to that. Then because this is not accept, okay, unless your cost factor here is to be accept, okay, and your scope is to be enhanced. So biasa scope enhanced, not much of an issue. So unless your cost here to be accept, then you can add on your additional workers, additional material, whatever. Okay, so when cost is to be enhanced, you have to be careful. Your selection ni depends on which is to be accepted punya variable. Okay. Alright, any further question from here? Okay, tak ada ya. So we have a little more time. We can move on to project closure sekejap. Okay, so the next topic will be basically the last topic. No, second to last. You have one tiny topic on the roles responsibility of project manager. Okay, so project closure is the last phase of your construction project. Okay, it is a phase whereby people sometimes overlook it, or sometimes it is negligible because kerja dah siap. Okay, so sometimes we see it as work has been completed, you see. So but it's important. Okay, so because sometimes we are excited to complete it, but there are a lot of things take away that we do not actually appreciate daripada project tu. Okay, so you have gone through from the very beginning project definition, you've gone through project planning, you have gone through project monitoring and control. How do you actually monitor, control your project? And finally, okay, once you have completed all the phases, you come to the last stage, which is project closure. Okay, so at the end of this, you should be able to understand why do we need to carry out project closure. There are certain aspects that you need to know in project closure. What are the activities conducted during project closure, and what are the output of a project closure? So it's like macam post-mortem lah. Okay, so you have done everything. You need to conduct a post-mortem to see where you have actually performed, and where are the weaknesses, and how you can actually learn from the weaknesses for your future project. Okay, so that's the idea. So project closure is the last phase of your project life cycle. Okay, so last phase of a project, yes, but last phase of a building, no. Okay, so because if you're talking about building, okay, your building would last until it's demolished. Okay, so for your building, after closure, you will have operations. So the client will take over to operate the building. And let's say for a period of 30, 40 years, and then the end of it will be project building demolition. That will be the end of your building per se. But for project, the project ends when it is closure, and then for construction, basically after the defect liability period, habislah basically. Okay, so the commencement of the project closure is determined by completion of all the objective, acceptance of the end of the project by the customer. Okay, so it involves quite a lot of activities. Okay, so it involves releasing the final deliverables to the customer, handing over project documentation, warranty, for example. Let's say you are the house owner of a new house. Okay, so air condition, aircon system, those would require warranty, and those are the document to be given to you as the end user. So that one is simple ways at looking at it lah. But at a bigger perspective is such as any documentation of drawings, okay, as-built drawings. So those are the things. Okay, and of course at this you will terminate supplier contract. Okay, so you will release project resources, all the workers, suppliers, subcontractors. So those are where you release all of this. It's not that you release all of that towards the end year. So actually you can see that in construction there will be a peak time. Okay, so a peak time where M&E, architect, structural will come in together, and the construction is vibrant lah basically waktu tu. And then slowly once that part has been over, usually you go back slower. Okay, so slower because a lot of it, your structure work might have been completed. So you're left with a lot of architectural and many work. And then slowly it will be reduced by as time goes by at the end, towards the end of the project. Okay, and communicating the closure to all stakeholders. Okay, so it's important that the project closure is communicated to all stakeholders. So the word stakeholders here, okay, so it is in your project as well. It is not only about the people in contract in construction. Okay, supposedly when we are trying to understand stakeholder, it involves also the end user. It involves also someone who is staying nearby your project. So sebenarnya lah, if you are trying to understand stakeholder, because anyone who would be impacted by the project, that is what we call any stakeholder. So it's just that those stakeholder yang mana end user, traffic user, passerby semua tu, we call it external stakeholder. So their input is needed, especially if you are trying to invade their if we are trying to actually whatever our project would have impact on them, especially project macam MRT. Okay, so because you will be there for years maybe, okay, and the access has been closed to the people staying around that project. So sebenarnya those project that would impact the people surrounding it, it would require input by the external stakeholder macam end user lah, okay, or the people. So stakeholder is anyone who have the interest and could be impacted by the project, okay. But typically what we usually look into will be the internal stakeholder. Okay, so the people in the contract. So client, consultant, contractor. So typically that will be internal stakeholder. Okay, so maybe I'll just write it down here. Oops. Stakeholder, you have internal, you have external stakeholders. Okay, so internal are the typical client, consultant. Client, consultant, contractor. Okay, so external can be the end user themselves. Okay, community, local authority. Okay, so that could be the external stakeholder. Normally we would emphasize a lot on the internal. Cuma nowadays with the current current environment, current situation, I think the external will play a huge role juga, because if anything were to happen, then sometimes we get complaints kan. Okay, so we might get complaints from the community. So those are the things that if we would try to reduce. If not, it will give impact to your project. If let's say there is a strike by community surrounding that area, your project would be at halt. Okay, so you kena stop the project for a while, ensure that they're happy. So tapi cuma one good thing about Malaysia, we are a very complying how to say, complying people kot. So we do not actually have a lot of strike as such to how to say, to show that we are unhappy. Okay, so I think in our situation there are not much of strike that community yang buat. So like if you look into other countries, when I was staying in Auckland, because the people there, okay, so they are unhappy when the government allow this the buying of land by outside people. Okay, so slowly the New Zealand government, basically they are actually releasing, I wouldn't say release, probably they allow, okay, so outsiders to actually own a land. How far, how detailed of it, I wouldn't be 100% sure, but the situation is as such. Okay, so there are allowance for the buying of land, and there are basically unhappy communities surrounding, and they actually come out with strikes and so on. Okay, so usually it's a peaceful walk, usually along the main street of what do you call Auckland City usually. So once in a while we will see that, okay, to show that the people are unhappy or the people are in disagreement when as such action lah. Okay, so but in Malaysia rarely that we see such walks or strike. We do have, but um very very rare occasion. Okay, but anyhow, coming back here, what I'm emphasizing is external stakeholder, you might see them as non-essential to a project, but actually it plays a huge role. If we are moving towards coming up with a project that is inclusive, we are trying to gather everyone is happy, basically. Okay, so to get the consent of everyone. So I think it's important. Okay. All right, so the last remaining step is to undertake a post-implementation review to quantify the level of project success and any lesson learned. So this is basically at the end of it like a post-mortem basically. Okay, so yeah. Okay, hold on All right, so in terms of project, okay, so when we are coming towards the end of the project, your project can either end, your project can either be extended, or your project can either be expanded. Okay, so what does it mean by project ending? What does it mean by project extension? And what does it mean by project expansion? Okay, so three different terms. Okay, so when you are considering your project to end, stop kat sana. Okay, so it will mean that you would transfer the asset to the client, to the funder. Okay, so once you have done that, you need to generate the final report. Nak tutup case. Okay, so tutup the project, you would generate the final report and you would have ex post evaluation. All right, so there would be like a post-mortem here. All right, so that would basically signify that your project has already ended. Okay, so you transfer it to the the end user or the client. Okay, on the other hand, towards the end of the project, your project might be extended. Okay, so a no cost extension or additional cost extension to finish the activities. So meaning to say that your project dah sampai the end date but you tak habis lagi. Okay, so maybe you are left with 98%. You have 2 more percent to complete the project. Then if you actually receive EOT, you are allowed the EOT, then no cost extension. Okay, so you have been given the extension of time. So as a contractor, if you are towards the end of the project, your date of completion may be 30th June. Tapi 30th June, you have not concluded. So maybe you are left with 2% of the work. So of course, you are not applying it 30th June lah. Okay, so you will be applying for the extension of time earlier. Okay, mentioning the justification, and the client, if the client accept the justification and it is within the contract condition though, so then you'll be given extension of time with no additional cost, okay, to complete the remaining. But however, let's say you are actually requiring extension of time but tidak diluluskan. Okay, so it has not been approved by the client, and your extension of time to the reasoning does not fall within the condition of contract. Maybe you are giving the reason is basically the fault is on you as a contractor. Okay, so maybe you do not have the sufficient workers. Okay, the fault is on you. is not from the consultant. For example, extension of time could be allowed if the consultant, feedback from the consultant, feedback from the client, which means the fault is not on the contractor. Okay, so maybe land possession, site possession slow given to you, then is you are eligible. However, if anything related to yourself, okay, as a contractor, so you do not have sufficient funding to have sufficient equipment to assist you, that's why there is a delay to it, then probably the fault is on you. Then rather than that, you'll be given the LAD. Okay, so that will come up with additional costs that you have to bear. Liquidated as certain damages. Okay, so then you need to pay for the penalty lah. Okay, so how much depends on the contract of a project. The higher the contract, the higher the penalty would be. Okay, another side of it, okay, so your project can either be ended, can either be extended, and your project can either be expanded. Okay, so expanded meaning to say that you have a certain locality, you have aimed dah, you're gonna come out with a township kat sini. Okay, and this is where you have opportunity to actually come out with the entire township. Okay, so you start off with probably a small township. Okay, so and then you move on having what do you call shopping mall here. Okay, so probably the best is such as some Sunway. Okay, so you can if you recall, actually Sunway started quite small. Okay, so that entire piece of land started small and slowly they grow, having hospital, having malls, having shop lots, having a university cell. So identify new target population, identify what to replicate. Okay, so you can either expand within this area, okay, or you can actually target or replicate similar approach into another area, so long is expanded. Okay, so which means your project stops there. However, it could be a potential to expand it either in same population, but you expand the type of project or the type of facility you're going to build, or in a new population and you replicate sebiji like this. Okay, so you have constructed in Senawang, for example, this type, and the same thing you want to apply it in Nilai ke, Seremban ke, something like that. Okay, so that is expanded. Okay, all right, the next thing. Okay, so okay, any question from here?
Not yet, doctor.
All right. Okay. So the next thing is basically project closure activities. Okay. So there are several activities, yeah. Okay. So project closure ni there are several activities. And then review project completion. Okay. So the role of the project manager during closure, usually when we are talking about project closure, you will not be having a lot of people on your site. Okay, so your workers tu mungkin remain yang sikit-sikit je, just completing a little bit of piping work, a little bit of painting work, so landscaping, so just a few. So to manage just a few, you don't need to have so many engineers on the site. So you would have actually transferred them into another project. So mungkin if you're left with engineer pun mungkin seorang, just to make sure that okay, things are, you know, closing up. And sometimes you can see that actually closing towards the end tu yang macam sangat lambat. Okay, so you can see the project that everything cepat rancak habis, and towards the end you can see that, you know, it is really taking quite a while to actually cover the project betul-betul. So that will be quite tricky juga, not easy. Towards the end nampak macam it's like you are there but you are not there kind of situation. Okay, so because sometimes the workers per mood depends on, you know, you have your friends or transferred elsewhere, so tinggal 2-3 orang, so it actually creates this mood yang macam nak habis tak habis macam tu. Okay, but anyhow, so the role of a project manager, okay, so to verify your project scope, stakeholder acceptance. Okay, for us it's pretty straightforward on this because we have a contract document. So your contract document, whatever is given in the contract document, you fulfill it, it should be fine. Cuma workmanship tu lah stakeholder acceptance. Let's say you have provided it to the client tapi client receive it nampak macam a lot of what they call a lot of workmanship issues. Okay, cracks all over, your pipe position is not properly aligned. Okay, so you know, sometimes to accept such project, if it's private, I think it will might not be accepted and you need to redo it. Okay, so that will be problematic lah. Okay, so especially if you look into sometimes pipe tu macam tak logik. Okay, the position of the pipe tu, you want to actually take in the water, dia macam terlalu ke dalam. So a lot of this kind of misalignment of placing things, so that actually shows how thoughtful the workmanship would reflect lah benda tu. So if a client who are basically particular, those are the things, even though nampak macam it's just a little bit, but you know, might not be accepted by the client. Okay. Alright, so next, project manager should formally terminate the activities. Okay, close all project finance. Okay, so what needs to be paid, what needs to be paid by the client. So close the project finances, administration and contract. Articulate, complete a handover strategy. How can we say the handover is over? Okay, so how can we say that we properly pass over the project to the client? Okay, and also report to donors lah. Okay, report to the client and so on. And main thing that people usually do not do is basically promote learning. So this one, people usually do not do. They move on. Okay, so after habis project, they move on to the next one without taking a chance to actually learn dalam the current project. Actually, in a project, there are a lot of things that you learn. So it goes back to how you basically manage knowledge. So a good organization would, teruknya, let me write it properly. Knowledge management. Okay, so this is where you can actually learn so that in your next project, if you encounter the same situation, you know what would be the potential solution. So sometimes, itulah knowledge sometimes is so wasted. So because sometimes you have seniors who have years of experience, tapi you do not tap into their knowledge, and then you expect the new engineers to start all over again with the little knowledge. So the cycle would be in a loop lah basically. You learn from scratch, learn from scratch and go through it. Rather than that, if you can actually properly document it, okay, all the learnings, then it could actually serve as a guide untuk the new engineers lah. Okay. Alright, so I think for today we will stop there. Okay, so for the next part of our lecture, we will go on to planning for project closure. Okay, so we'll stop there. All right, so far any question? Okay, if there are no questions, we will stop our class here for today. Okay, so thank you for attending. Kenapa hari ni attendance rendah It's only 39. We have around 52 dalam kelas tu. Anyhow, thank you for attending the class. Okay, and you have a good week ahead. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doktor.
Thank you,
Alright.
Doktor.
Doktor nak tanya. Tadi dalam slide tadi ada yang role of project manager tu. Yang number 5 tu report to donors tu. Donors tu siapa?
Donors tu client lah.
Oh, okay.
So So funder lah. Sometimes client dipanggil funder sebab siapa yang bagi duit lah.
Okay, faham. Thank you, Doktor.
Alright.